Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Let me just fix this, okay. Hope you're doing well. In this video I will be taking a bit of a break from philosophy to return to MBTI and psychology types. And more specifically, I want to make a video on how to spot an INFJ in real life. As you know, INFJs are supposed to be relatively rare types, standing at about 1% of the population. Those are the typical estimates, and I do think that INFJs are quite rare, but they're not impossible to spot. So if you would like to spot an INFJ, I think that there are some telltale signs, like that not necessarily make sense by themselves, but if there is a certain number of those signs concatenated together in a person's way of being, of behaving, that might be a sign that they are INFJs. Based on my own experience and also on my own observation. So usually an INFJ will be a bit of a weird mix of quite capable of being social and being involved socially, and at the same time will disappear or will not be available at times when you might think that they are available. This comes from like a weird interplay between their first and second function. I'm not going to go into the functions too much here, but basically there are people who are quite outgoing if they're not too shy. They have good people skills, and they can give you the impression that they're like always going to be available, and then it turns out that they're not, because they actually need to recharge. They like being home. So they're these people who are really pleasant to be around, but not as available as you might initially have thought. So that's a sign that I think is quite common for INFJs. Another sign is that they are a weird mix of usually reasonably well organized and reasonably reliable, but at the same time they are a little bit up in the air, like head in the sky. They're quite dreamy people, and at the same time, even though they are quite dreamy people, they are, like I said, they're not like your sort of caricature of the person who's very abstract and head in the clouds and not reliable. Actually, they will be reliable when they tell you that they're going to be there. They will make it, they will come. Sometimes they will not be available. If they decide to make the effort, they will come and they will be very nice. But when they allow themselves to be very much like themselves, like they really are, they will not necessarily be as in touch with the practical world. They like to be, they can come across a little bit spacey sometimes. They like to discuss very abstract things, although they would tend to always make sure that the environment and the people in the environment are ready to sort of engage with that. If they notice that, because they have a good sense for noticing that what people want to talk about, and usually if they sense that there would be a discordance if they were to start talking about something that people are not interested in, they will not do that. But once they become comfortable and they can have their audience, then they will start talking about what interests them, and they can become very talkative to the point of not necessarily coming across like they are actually introverts. But that tends to be mostly for when they are very interested in the topic. You might say that's the case with everyone, but I think that INFJs, if they're not somewhere against their will, if they have decided to go somewhere, it means that they have prepared psychologically for the different possibilities that may happen. And if the topic is not related to something that interests them particularly, they will still be pleasant and still ask questions and still, be only comfortable if they feel like the external environment is comfortable. Another sign that you're dealing with an INFJ is that there's a conflict between, a little bit of a soul conflict between the fact that they tend to be quite logical and rational people, but at the same time they are also idealistic and sensitive. So it can be a bit of a tug of war going on. I mean, that's a well-known thing, but between their ability to critically examine particular theories, like to be critical in debates, to be sharp in debates, but at the same time, if that means that the opponent is going to sort of like double down and become sharp as well, they might be like, oh no, I didn't really want that, like, and they would almost prefer just bringing that to a close because they're easily stressed out by conflictual situations. So it creates like a weird context where they're very much capable. Like, I think INFJs are people who hold back a little bit. It's like you have a great power, not necessarily, but like you have power, you don't use it too much because in a way, like, not upsetting people like comes first. And it doesn't necessarily come from like a selfless place. It's not only that they don't want to upset people, it's also that, and that's quite important, I think, to understand in INFJ, is that they don't want to upset people because if people are upset, they will absorb the sort of vibes of tension in the room, and that will upset them in turn. So it's not directly selflessness sometimes or oftentimes. It's just the fact that INFJs tend to be quite sensitive to the vibes in a room. Like, they are not always consciously, that they just feel the vibe in a room quite strongly. In fact, they feel the vibe in a room in terms of emotion, even aesthetics, very sensitive to the way a particular environment looks. And if an environment looks a certain way that they don't like, they might find it even hard to be in that room. I mean, not to that extent, but that will affect them like quite a bit. But yeah, like say like the emotional vibes of a particular place, very, very sensitive to that, particularly if they're like highly sensitive INFJs. And a lot of INFJs tend to be highly sensitive people because they just have this intuitive ability to just feel like just the atmosphere, the texture and color of the atmosphere where they are in such a way that they absorb it. And if they sense they have the power to change it for the better, they will. But sometimes their critical ability they sense as having the power to change it for the worse. And if that's the case, they will prefer holding back, not utilizing that, to just keep at peace. And I think a lot of the time, the selflessness of an INFJ, for which they're well known supposedly, I'm saying it's the case. There are lots of them who are like that. But the peaceable nature of an INFJ often comes from the fact that, like, for their own sake, and for their own, knowing their own tendency to absorb, whether they like it or not, other people's emotions, they want to make sure that, like, the emotion in the room, in the place where they are, is, let's say, positive, because they obviously want to not be too affected too much. And it's a very weird thing. It's like, they're not, like, if they were purely rational types, maybe they would be less sensitive to that. But the fact of the matter is, they're a bit of both, and they have to deal with that almost all the time. So now maybe like a last little trait that I find in INFJs that maybe some people will have more to say, like, of course, but I don't want this video to be too long, so I'll stop after this, is the sense of humor of an INFJ. I think you hear a lot that INFJs tend to be like sort of not like naive or anything, but they want everyone to be happy and they're sensitive. But actually, like, the sense of humor of an INFJ who allows themselves to be like natural, and it's a distinctive trait that INFJs don't reveal themselves easily. I think sometimes they're a bit of a mystery to themselves too, and like finding out what they're about is a very important trait of an INFJ. And like, they have that in common with INFPs, but from a different perspective. But the sense of humor of an INFJ can be actually quite playful, sometimes even irreverent. It's just that, like, they will only trust to express that with people that they've already sort of analyzed and filtered as being trustworthy. They will not allow themselves to take risks in the presence of people that they don't really know. They will be very careful, but if they allow themselves to be, like, really natural themselves, you could be very surprised. Like, the humor of an INFJ, I don't want to say it has no bounds, but it is the horizons of it are very, very wide, and they are far from as being innocent, as naive as some people think. But in order to see that, in order to get a sense of that, the INFJ needs to be themselves with a person that they trust. And that is something that, the barriers they have for them to lower them, it's not easy. Requires trust. But they can be great fun. if they decide to. See you guys.